I also read my namesake, Catherine Maher, was head of NPR, and, she said, "We're completely unbiased. Give me a break, lady." Now let me read the NPR. NPR said, "It sounds like Chappelle is using white privilege to excuse his homophobia and transphobia." Wait, now Dave Chappelle can have white privilege? I'm really confused now.
Okay, so let me get this straight. Bill Maher, one of the most recognizable faces on the political left, just went on national television and absolutely torched NPR. Not Fox News, not some right-wing podcast, but NPR, the beloved public radio station your college professor swears is the gold standard of journalism. And honestly, the moment was absolutely glorious. Maher didn't hold back, didn't sugarcoat it, and didn't care whose feelings got hurt in the process. He looked directly at the camera and essentially said what millions of Americans have been thinking for years: NPR isn't neutral. It's not even close. If you're the kind of person who loves watching sacred cows get roasted in real time, you're going to want to stick around for this one. Hit that like button and subscribe to the channel because we're just getting started. Here's the backstory. PBS recently testified before Congress amid accusations of liberal bias. Republicans have been pushing to defund public broadcasting for decades, and this latest hearing reignited the debate. Should taxpayer dollars really be going to media outlets that half the country believes are pushing a political agenda? It's a fair question. While you might expect someone like Bill Maher to rush to NPR's defense, that's not what happened, not even close. Instead, he brought up Catherine Maher, the former head of NPR, who publicly claimed the outlet was completely unbiased. Maher's response? "Give me a break, lady." That line alone sent shockwaves through the media landscape.
The heads of NPR and PBS testified before Congress this week amid accusations of liberal bias. Should the government continue to send taxpayer dollars to public broadcasters? Well, a little background here. They've been after them for the Republicans who wanted to get rid of PBS for as long as I can remember. This crowd will probably do it. I also read my namesake, Catherine Maher, was head of NPR, and, she said, "We're completely unbiased. Give me a break, lady." They're crazy far left.
Here's why it matters. When criticism comes from the other side of the political aisle, it's easy to dismiss. You can write it off as partisan noise, culture war nonsense, or simply people being angry for the sake of being angry. But when Bill Maher, a guy who has spent most of his career aligned with liberal causes, turns around and says NPR has gone too far left, that's different. That carries weight. It's not a conservative talking point, it's an insider saying the quiet part out loud. And Maher didn't stop there. He made a compelling argument for why public broadcasting no longer makes sense in today's political climate. His reasoning is pretty simple. NPR was created during a time when Republicans and Democrats didn't hate each other, when political disagreements were just that, disagreements, not existential battles for the soul of the nation. Back then, a publicly funded media outlet could theoretically serve everyone. But now, in an era where both sides view the other as an actual threat to democracy, Maher argues that model is broken beyond repair. You can't have a taxpayer-funded media organization claiming to be neutral when half the country believes it is actively working against them. That perception alone destroys credibility, and, as we all know, perception is everything in media.
So, I think we're past we're past the age, really, where the government, first of all, why do we need to subsidize? Why can't we have outlets like this? And we're so polarized. These outlets became popular at a time when Republicans and Democrats didn't hate each other and weren't at each other's throats and didn't think each other was an existential threat. In that world, you can't have places like this, I think, anymore. They have to be private.
Here's where things get really interesting. Bill Maher's critique wasn't just theoretical, he came with receipts. Remember when Dave Chappelle released his controversial comedy special a few years back, the one that sent social media into a complete meltdown? Maher pointed out something fascinating about how outlets like NPR covered that entire saga. Critics, including NPR, absolutely savaged the special. It ended up with something like a 43% critics score on Rotten Tomatoes, dismal, embarrassing, and by critical standards, a total failure. But here's the twist, audiences loved it. Regular, everyday people who actually watched the special gave it a 95% approval rating. 95%. That's not a small gap, that's a canyon.
I read some of these reviews. I'm just going to read this one from NPR. It's because the reviews from the critics so at variance with the audience. Rotten Tomatoes, that's a amalgam of reviews. I think in this case 7. His special got a 43%. Audience 95. Says a lot about the differentiation between real people and the...
This says a lot about the difference between real people and the media elite. And Maher's point is that this disconnect tells you everything you need to know about where NPR stands. They weren't reporting on public sentiment, they were trying to shape it. They amplified the voices of cultural gatekeepers and activist critics while completely ignoring the fact that real people, the ones actually consuming the content, thought Dave Chappelle was hilarious. That's not journalism, that's curation with an agenda. It's selective framing designed to push a narrative, and Bill Maher sees right through it. But wait, it gets even better. Maher then read one of the actual NPR reviews of Chappelle's special, and this is where things got truly absurd. The review accused Dave Chappelle of using white privilege to excuse his alleged transphobia.
Now let me read the NPR. NPR said, it sounds like Chappelle is using white privilege to excuse his homophobia and transphobia. Wait, now Dave Chappelle can have white privilege? I'm really confused now.
Let that sink in for a second. Dave Chappelle, one of the most successful black comedians in American history, a man whose entire career has been built on commentary about race, culture, and the black experience in America, that guy has white privilege now? Bill Maher couldn't believe it either. He looked genuinely confused and said, wait, now Dave Chappelle can have white privilege? I'm really confused. And honestly, who can blame him? This is the kind of ideological gymnastics that makes people lose faith in mainstream media. When you're so committed to a political framework that you accuse a black man of benefiting from white privilege simply because you disagree with his jokes, you've lost the plot entirely. You're not analyzing anymore, you're just slapping buzzwords onto things you don't like and hoping no one notices.
Or that there's a connection, that because you don't agree with what he said, which again, I don't think is transphobic. A lot of the special is about how he has this friendship with a trans person who is his opening act.
But people do notice. They notice far more than legacy media wants to admit. This is exactly why Bill Maher believes NPR should be defunded, not because conservative outlets are inherently better. They have their own biases, and Maher would be the first to admit that. The difference is that Fox News and MSNBC don't pretend otherwise. Everyone knows where they stand. Their bias is baked into their brand. You tune into Fox expecting a conservative perspective, and you watch MSNBC expecting liberal commentary. There's no deception involved. But NPR still wraps itself in the language of public service and neutrality while taking money from taxpayers across the entire political spectrum.